A very good afternoon to one and all present here. So today we are going to deal on a very specific topic, that is identifying variables in hypothesis and testing in our online webinar. And we have a very esteemed resource person present before us who is going to deliver on this topic. Since most of us are academician and most of us are even required to do research for thesis submission or for seminars and all. And I hope many of us are from the field of social sciences, where we deal with most of the time in qualitative research. So when we go for qualitative research, sometimes we face certain problems, issues in identifying the variables, quantifying them for testing, since it is more often concerned with qualitative data analysis. In such situations, we often used to face certain dilemmas, and very rare amount of occasions are available where we get the opportunity to discuss in detail with examples how to identify variables in hypothesis and how to test the validity of the hypothesis. So taking a note on these issues, we have thought of to organize the webinar on behalf of this Department of Law, School of Legal Jurisprudence Studies, Central University of Karnataka, and it is our esteemed privilege that Dr. Rhea ma'am, who is also doing her postdoctoral research in the Leiden University, the Netherlands, is present with us and is devoting her valuable time for enlightening us with a very specific topic that I've already mentioned. Without much delay, I would like to welcome each and every participant to this webinar, and will also request you to please turn on your video cameras. And since this is a part of research, so it will be a more interactive kind of session as suggested by a resource person. So I encourage everyone to be active in during this session. And with this, I request Mr. Aditya, research scholar from Department of Law, to introduce the resource person and to moderate the session from here on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Aditya, research scholar, Department of Law, Central University of Karnataka. I'm going to be the moderator of today's international webinar session, and it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Rhea Roy ma'am as a resource person. Dr. Rhea Roy ma'am is currently postdoctoral fellow at Van Vollenhoven Institute, Netherlands. Before relocating to the Netherlands, she served as a senior assistant professor at Ramaya College of Law, Bangalore. She is a gold medalist in her graduation, and she completed her LLM in human rights, and her PhD is focused on a study of experiential legal education in India from NLSIU Bangalore. She served as an Indo-Canadian Shastri Fellow to Canada and a Linnaeus Palm Fellow to Sweden. She is a Harvard certified trainer in higher education learning. She has contributed to various international and national projects, notably the UNDP project on biodiversity, the Government of India's project on India's response to Paris Climate Change Convention, and the NCW project on women's reproductive rights. She has authored 3 books. She also serves as an editor and reviewer for numerous publications. She is also the co-founder of Jusfocus Research Institute, under which she organizes various international workshops, bringing together scholars from India and Netherlands and other cross-border trainings. Her area of expertise include human rights, environmental law, and legal education, with a focus on interdisciplinary approaches. And finally, but importantly, she's a mother of 2 children. Now, ma'am, I request Dr. Rhea Roy, ma'am, to kindly begin your lecture. We're all eagerly looking forward for your lecture. Thank you. I request participants, please turn off your mic, and if you have any doubts, only turn on. Any technical problem is there, please put your doubts in the chat box. Thank you. Please turn on your video also. Thank you. Thank you. Ma'am, session is yours.
Thank you so much. And your name is Aditya, is it?
Yes, ma'am. His name is Adi.
Yeah, thank you so much for this nice, and I think this is the most personal and really nice introduction I've got, especially the concluding remarks. Thank you so much. So welcome everyone. Pooja, if you don't mind, can you? I don't think I can mute you, but there's some background noise from your
Yes,
side.
ma'am. I'm trying to mute, but this is not get muted.
No problem, no problem. I think Pooja would be able to do that. All right, just before I start off with an extensive lecture, I have some disclaimers and some expectations to be set here. One is that I did go through your background and that you filled in the form. And one of the core areas that I thought I should do is to set out the expectation, because some of you are expecting, maybe at least one or two of you are expecting about tools that we use for hypothesis testing, or how are we going to get in with regression analysis and likewise. Unfortunately, we won't be dealing with those in detail, except going through them on our theoretical framework for various factors. Like, I won't be dealing with SPSS tools. I won't be dealing with HubSpot or any of these tools because of time constraints, and also that all of these require all of us to have these tools, and unless you have access to them, it doesn't make sense for me to talk about it. And second is, I'm not an expert in handling these tools per se, except that I've used them in my research, but I've also had data stewards and statisticians who worked with me to get this in place. So what we're going to go through today is to look at, as scholars, as researchers, as academicians, when you are getting these data in hand. So getting the data is not the problem. When you get the data, using this data to answer the questions that you have, you need to understand how it works. So you being more than being able to use SPSS or HubSpot, it's best if you can use them, but you can always take and help. And most of the universities provide that kind of space, and it's completely with an academic integrity to seek professional help in this in terms of statisticians, but to understand and translate it to the way it suits your research. So we're going to look at these terminologies, how does it work? And as an example, I'm going to be taking my own thesis topic, because then I can show you some of the exercises that I've engaged with, and you can probably refer to in my thesis as well. Right, just keeping this in mind, I really hope I'm able to give you something that you expect, and we interact and we do some tiny mini exercise together. So as I understand, and I did see some hands raised, we are all good to start? Yes?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to presume that all of you have an idea about what research problem is, research question is, identifying a research question, identifying a research design. Are we all on the same page, at least to that extent? Okay, let's keep research design aside for a minute, at least research problem, identification of research questions. All right. So I did see some of your response on what hypothesis is and what it means. So I think we are also on the same page to come out to a conclusion that it talks about some kind of assumptions, right? But before, again, why do we need such assumptions? Anyone?
Ma'am, to give directions towards the conclusion of the research.
Direction, yes. Okay, good. Because I had a very interesting question in the background is it mandatory to have a hypothesis? So does the research become incomplete if you don't have a hypothesis? Does research exist without hypothesis? So, anyone?
Yes, ma'am. Research.
Can be. Ma'am, good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, Arun.
Ma'am, when we doesn't have a data.
I'm so sorry, Zenith. May I come to you, take your question after I listen to Arun?
Ma'am, good afternoon, ma'am.
Research can be done
Yes.
without hypothesis.
Ma'am, when we are doing in policy making research, when we don't have data, then how can we test a hypothesis when we doesn't have a data?
Okay. Now then I will have to come back and ask you what data is, but Arun, I'm going to reserve your question for now, okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, because we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Okay. Then I think Banu made a statement about statement saying in qualitative research we don't need a hypothesis. Well, we're going to come back and question that again. Zenith, you had a point, and I think Nandini raised a question of exploratory. Spot on. We don't need hypothesis. Excellent. Zenith?
Ma'am, I'm not sure, but is it grounded theory research?
Yes, yes. We don't necessarily need a hypothesis. Yes.
Hypothesis.
Not an exploratory. Yes. And I think anyone else? Okay. So let's get, so one of the fundamentals that we are going to keep in mind is doctrinal research. You know what, that's something we're going to cover. Like I think qualitative, doctrinal, and the question of policy. And I'm going to presume that the statement Arun made is also sourced from the fact that policy research may have an inclination doctrinal research or likewise. So one of the fundamental understanding we need to get here is there are researchers or understanding, say, for example, in historical, exploratory, jurisprudential research, you don't necessarily, or you are not mandatorily required to have a hypothesis. So what is mandatorily required is to have a research question, right? Because in fact, a hypothesis is drawn from the research questions, right? So you come out with some kind of assumption or a conclusion from your basic understanding that this could potentially be the case, right? And in case where you are trying to find some facts by itself, you're trying to figure out a situation or simply draw out a jurisprudential understanding or draw out the historical genesis of a concept, you don't need to have a hypothesis, right? Now, when you come to doctrinal or qualitative, you will have hypothesis. You could have hypothesis. I'm not saying you will. You could potentially have a hypothesis because there are ways you're going to test them. Now, coming to Arun's question about what happens if you don't have data. Now, then the question goes down to see what are these data? So how do you define data, right? And data would vary depending on the methodology that we're going to cover. So I must again then give you a disclaimer here. You might feel a lot of gray areas untouched because when the moment you touch upon hypothesis and hypothesis testing, invariably you go into qualitative data, quantitative data, or even doctrinal data. How do you test all of this? How do you evaluate all of this? Unfortunately, we're not going to be covering all of this together, right? I'm going to give you insights into the existence of this, how it works in variance, and look at ways in which testing can be applied so that you can take it from there. All right. So in this, I'm going to share my screen. And I don't like Google Meet for the fact that, when I share the screen, I can't see any of you. So I'm going to rely on you to communicate. I love to share.
Yes, ma'am. We'll do the part of communication.
Yeah. You share, see my, I'm guessing you can see my screen. Yeah?
Till now, it is not visible.
Okay. Okay, entire screen. Yeah, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Screen is
Now
visible.
it's
Yes, screen is visible, but I think you have switched off the camera or something with the camera is.
my camera is on. Okay, let me see. Stop presenting. I try again.
Now it's on. If you present the screen, then your camera gets off. If you switch on the camera,
Okay.
screen gets off.
So then I think I will keep sharing and disconnecting because I will want to talk to all of them as well.
Okay, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it yeah. No?
Yes, ma'am. Now it's fine.
No, it's okay? Yeah.
Okay, both are visible now.
Okay, okay. Okay, so let's just put this. I'm presuming how many of you are here because of your PhD? I have to come back to you again. PhD testing. How many of you are here for your research paper? You can use the chat also. Yeah. Right? So you probably be in a stage of research where you are working on a challenge or an identified problem, and you've come down to a conclusion to make it more evidence-based while you're putting across your results, right? So that is where the idea of hypothesis comes in. Got it? So as we all know, hypothesis is this whole idea of a tentative statement that you're putting together, which
Ma'am, your
establishes...
PPT is not visible.
Oh my God.
Please share your PPT.
Ma'am, your screen was shared, but PPT, I think it was in the minimized form.
Okay, wait, let me try. I'm so sorry. Now?
Yes, now it is coming. Yeah, now it is visible.
Now it's okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So you can see the PPT?
No,
Yes,
ma'am,
yes.
it is not visible.
No, PPTs are not visible.
It's visible, ma'am.
Now,
Here it is
now, ma'am.
visible.
Yes,
Now
ma'am.
it's visible.
It's visible, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's visible, ma'am.
Please? Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am, it is
PPT.
visible, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So I was
Now
just,
it
no,
is
anyway,
visible.
the first thesis, first chapter or whatever, the first slide is just about what hypothesis is. And all of us are on the same page about what hypothesis is. It's about a tentative conclusion that you come to. But how do you come to the tentative conclusion? How do you reach that conclusion? Yeah? How
Ma'am,
do you come to this?
ma'am, when we do review of literature.
Okay, excellent. Review of literature. Then?
By identifying the research gap and setting the problem statement.
Okay, so we have review of literature. Interestingly, the review of literature should help you identify the research gap. Why is your research important, right? I mean, if there's already, as Divya and Manasa rightly pointed out, if you are covering up, unless your research is covering up an existing gap or an argument, why would you want to contribute anything more to it, right? When you have an identification of research gap, and Manasa, you had one more point.
A probability statement also leads for the hypothesis setting or to come out with what comparison or what kind of statement will be fixing.
Right. So when you identify a research problem as well, so your research problem is going to overlap with the research gap that you've identified, and you've identified there is something that the research needs to fulfill or come out with, or the answer to this problem can only be solved by the conclusion of your research, which means a direct answer is not available in the literature that's already existing. Are you with me? Say, for example, if I'm going to take, if I'm going to take, mine was on experiential legal education, right? So there were extensive research conducted on clinical legal education. And my study or the idea of clinical legal education was central focus or certain state focused. So when I'm going to take about experiential legal education, what is that I'm trying to contribute from the specific area? When I try to clarify that, I'm trying to establish, say, see, the study focuses on, there are 4 clinical papers. Clinical papers were attempted to theories, and during theories, students were not catered to what they had to. So one thing I figured while doing my literature review and identifying the research gap was to see, of all through the research, they had failed to identify what were the skills and values that these students had to achieve through these clinical papers, and failed to identify what were the skills that they did not comply through the clinical papers, and how far, to what extent was there a fallout, and was there a difference between different types of institutes. So there are definitely a lot of variables that was included into it, and I had to establish a lot of correlation. So whilst I read through this, understand that this concept exists, there is an examination of information on this area, but the study or existing literature's research has failed to cover certain areas. And based on this, I could probably come out with a presumption. And let's remember the idea of hypothesis being there. One is to give us a direction. Second is also to cater to the fact that researchers by default are biased, right? So you would actually see that as a researcher, your topic, your conclusion would be influenced by your ideology, the materials you've got hold of, and what you've been exposed to, right? So invariably, can we all agree, do you all agree that we have a level of bias within us? Correct. So what we're trying to say is, when the research, what the research or the hypothesis is trying to tell you is, okay, now you're going to be biased, but let your assumption be based on some of those tangible facts. Okay? And in order to test our assumptions or our belief that we have raised, we come out with what we generally understand as hypothesis. Got it? That is how we agree to the fact that we must or we can potentially have a tentative statement that establishes some identified variables that we are putting it to some kind of test. To get it better, it is simple to understand. It's like an elephant in the room. You know the story of elephant in the room, right? All of you familiar with that? No? Yes, Seema. Okay. Arya is not familiar. It's a very, very interesting. It's like, so the elephant in the room concept is, now imagine, I'm presuming all of us are lawyers, right? All of us are put blindfolded. Okay, so the story goes like this. There were 5 blind men in a room left with an elephant. Okay? So each of them were allowed to touch different parts of the elephant. So one person touched the leg, one person touched the tail, one person touched the body, and the other person touched the ear, and likewise. Now, as each person touched, what happens is their perception was, okay, when they touched the tail, it was like a stick. The one who touched the leg, it was like, oh, it's a pillar. Now, all of them are sharing information with each other. And this leads to a conflict because perception based. Now, imagine this is how your research also works. Your research is based on your perceptions, your reading, and your understanding. Now, when you're trying to communicate this to me, I necessarily need not understand the way you have perceived it. Now, can we say that it's my perception and you don't have to be bothered with it? No. You are doing a research to disseminate your understanding to the general public and reduce the disparity in these perceptions. And in order to reduce the disparity, so remember, I'm not talking about doing away with the disparity. I'm not talking about, minimize or saying that all of them are going to understand the same language. all we're trying to do is reduce the variance. Got it? So the moment that is established or proved to be done based on certain parameters. Remember that. The reason I'm using parameters is because be it doctrinal or non-doctrinal, you can use it through the mechanism to understand that. Are you with me? Yes. All right. So,
Yes, ma'am.
yes, very good. Now we're going into understand. So this is what it is all about. Of course, as we initially agreed, focus and direction, testing of legal theory. So what our assumptions are, right? So I don't know if I'm sure you would have come across this theory facts concept. I think I don't know if it's Roscoe Pound or one of the jurists who keep saying, you have facts, you test the facts, from the facts, you develop a theory. Now, in order to test the theory, you develop the facts, you go backwards and you develop the facts. So what are these facts? Facts are what we call as data for us. And what these data are, we'll come to. Okay. Then to ensure the validation of research. So we understood that we might be motivated to take up a research because of our personal challenges, personal inhibitions, or likewise. But since our personal connection to the research shouldn't be anyone else's problem, we are trying to validate it with certain elements that can be generally shared around. Got it? Then we are trying to come out with a problem solving or more systematic method. Because one of the greatest challenges legal researchers, I'm presuming that a lot of us are legal researchers or social scientists, is that we handle a lot of abstract terms, right? We handle terms like justice, we handle terms like, I don't know, fairness, we handle terms like, I don't know, all those various components, which unlike a scientific research, we face a lot of challenges with. So again, to minimize all of this, we engage or try to engage with these tentative statements. So hypothesis acts as an anchor that helps us stay rooted to what our direction of research is going to be. For example, now if I was to take a research topic like mine, it was on a study of experiential legal education in India. Now, my submission was during COVID. Naturally, a curiosity would come to, how does this work in case of online mechanisms? Now the question is, as a concept, should as a researcher, should I be concerned about it? What do you think? Mamta is confused. She wants to nod her head, but she's not sure if she should completely say yes or no. So in fact, this was one of my third panel question. Implementation of experiential legal education during COVID. What do you think? Should, as a researcher, I mean, even if you're writing a paper, should I be concerned about it? What do you think, Mamta? Unfortunately, Mamta switched on the video and there I call her. Yes? Yes, consider okay. Okay, I have majority saying yes. Oh my God, if you were evaluating my thesis, I would have cleared it then. Now, that is something that you will also face when you write your paper. Your research what was my research focus? Right? My research focus was to understand about the skills or what were the skills lacking or not developed while not implementing the experiential learning. Or I was trying to see if you have implemented experiential learning, there were certain skills and values as a lawyer you would have developed, which would have been lacking if it was not engaged into the course, right? So my test was a pan-India test to understand, is it a variance or is there a fundamental difference by engaging in this experiential learning or not? Now, as an enthusiastic researcher like you and you all, I face the same question about online, then the question about different courses, 3-year LLB, 5-year LLB. Should that be a matter of concern? If I look at it, not really. Because I'm testing something here. So the moment there's a possibility that you can be connected to ancillary topics, right? Say, for example, I want to take something else. If you can give me a topic recommendation. Can you give me one of your topics so I can maybe take it better? If you don't mind sharing any of your topic in the chat. I will come to it. I will come to it. Can someone of you give me another topic? Something. Can I take climate change? I deal a lot with education, but okay, EIA. Okay, Vijay. Administrative policy. Oh, mama, nice, interesting. There's so many more coming. So I'm going to take. Okay, now I'm going to take EIA for now. Okay. E-commerce sector, AI and legal education professionalism. Okay, so all of these are generic areas. I need to go a bit more specific. Now, if I was to take AI in legal education or e-commerce consumer protection, I need something very, okay, the moment we ask for a topic, right? We need to figure out what is that particular that you want to address with. So EIA would have various component about EIA. Okay, one of the examples that one of the theses that was defended here was including EIA in housing constructions. So what we follow in the Netherlands or the Nordic countries is we have an EIA when it comes to even housing construction that they need an EIA and clearance. I'm going to take that. Okay. Now with that, in case when it comes to EIA in housing construction, then my question is the involvement of engagement with public participation, because EIA in housing construction does not have public participation as a mandatory element for the most obvious reasons that it delays the entire process. So as a researcher, I'm going to come down to the conclusion, or my tentative hypothesis is going to be EIA without including public participation defeats the purpose of environment impact assessment, thereby making it futile. Okay, that is my presumption. All right. So when I'm doing my research on that, and I want to test this, does doing away with public participation affects the purpose of environment impact assessment? Are you with me? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Somewhere, but I know I see confused faces.
Yes,
Okay, I will try a bit more, and then maybe one more time I try, and then see if we can get it. So, okay, do we get the concept saying that okay, maybe it's not, if not, environment might not be everybody's interest. So environment in EIA, public participation, housing constructions, clearance, legal obstacles or bottlenecks. Now, as a researcher, I would be tempted to see, I would definitely have to look into the why public participation is important in EIA. Correct? But now what I would try to do when I want to test it, I can potentially be tempted to see or take an example where EIA is or public participation is included in tribal areas, or public participation is included in very larger projects, and use that or understand that and evaluate that and come down to my understanding or apply it in my smaller scenario. Now, this would mean I am going out and taking ancillary informations, which dilutes what I need to understand. Because there, when I'm concerned about housing, including EIA, my potential argument would be, when I want to take out a qualitative interview method here, is to say that housing considers small scale sectors. With the new, with public participation, public opinion, it's not going to come down to any kind of conclusion, and every time you engage with public participation, it delays the process of housing. Unlike larger projects, with the numeracy of projects, I cannot probably have public participation like the larger project. But the moment I try to take out other ancillary areas, what happens is I'm diluting my study. Are you with me? So that is where the hypothesis is going to help me. When I say my concern is about this, I am trying to give out a focused understanding. But of course, don't forget that we are doing away with the conceptual understanding. Okay. I can give you one more example. Maybe I take education again, EI education, housing, water. Oh my, there's a lot of topic. I'm going to take legal education. All of us are party to it. Now, all of us would have heard this concept. No, AI would have reduced the credibility of research done, which I disagree with. Now, what AI, let's say ChatGPT, for instance. My question here is impact of ChatGPT on advancing legal research. So I'm going to say AI tools has made a significant impact in advancing the quality of legal papers published. Okay, let's say that's what I'm going to presume, or my hypothesis is. In that case, you could potentially be like, so you're going to define, we're going to come to operational definition, variables, connection, and all of that. Keeping that aside for now, the moment this comes, and then someone's going to come and tell you, okay, have you looked into how this is taken up for discussion in class, how the assignments are going to be, how the students' reading ability is going to be, like all of that going into it. Got it? So now, should I be concerned with that as a researcher? Not really at this point. If my focus is on about legal articles disseminated. Now, if you don't have a hypothesis specifically specified, established, your tendency to cater to all the other needs would come in. And this would primarily happen when it comes to PhD as well. Because as a PhD scholar, of course, you would have a broader area and you are trying to bring in an empirical element or a doctrinal analysis, however you want to take it. What happens here, you can get distracted. Now, when you establish a conceptual framework of AI tools, so you will establish what ChatGPT is, Grammarly, or, you have all of these PDF readers, or, you have all of these tools that's going to support you. And you define them and you evaluate, take, say, a specific number of articles identified. Maybe you're going to identify journals from Scopus in legal research. What is their AI policy? What is the quality of the articles? Maybe you identify 10 articles from it, evaluate or make a comparison. We identify the methodology. You come down to a conclusion. Imagine you were to do this with all of the other. It defeats your study. It defeats your results. Are you with me? So that is why we rely on hypothesis for it. That is where we come out with the concept of variables. What is the relation between them? Is it important to establish that? Because what happens, we are in a very tricky position as social scholars or social scientists or legal scientists. Everything we touch are variables. We handle humans. We handle abstract terms. None of this actually has a constant value. All of this varies. Got it? So for us to establish our arguments, we need to give in a lot more effort than what you could see in a scientific, pure science study. Are we all on the same page on that? I'm presuming we are. Yeah? Great. Then we go into identifying how are we going to establish or develop the hypothesis. I'm sure all of you have probably made an attempt to it. And maybe at this point, we'll take 5 minutes to do an exercise as well. Yes, that's right. So what we're going to look is how are we going to draw out a hypothesis. I'm presuming now I'm going to presume that all of you have a level of a topic identified, a research problem identified, some questions identified. So it's drawn from some specific focus research questions. So just remember, I'm not going to research questions, but one thing I need to tell you, your research questions must be framed in such a way that it is not directly answered from an existing literature. Got it? Yeah. And you draw out an hypothesis from that. Then, of course, then you substantiate it with an existing literature. Thereafter, we come to a very important part called as variable. Now, keep that term in the side, okay? We're going to see what variables are. Both variables and that variable must have a correlation. Or necessarily not, we'll come, there are different types of hypotheses, but generally as legal scholars, we try to establish a correlation. Because if you are looking at a management studies or if you're looking at, say, a scientific, it's not necessary. But since we have an element to see what impacts the other, right? We are primarily looking at an impact assessment. We probably be trying to understand how a law impacts, if a law is valid or if a system is sustainable, or since we are looking into all of that, we would invariably have a correlation involved in it. And these established variables, what we're going to define, must be definable and testable. Say, for example, if you make a generic hypothesis like, something standard that we generally say is, in order to curb crime against children under 18, we need a stringent juvenile laws. Now, we have so many abstract terms here. How are we going to test all of this? Are you with me? Most of the time, we tend to frame hypothesis that way. Stringent laws required, graver punishment required. But what is your basis for that? Are you with me? So what we're trying to, exactly. So what we're trying to do is summarize, filter it out again. Do you have a specific challenge that you need to address? Got it? So if you're going to take, it's like this doctrine of severability that you've studied, right? We've all studied in our constitution and otherwise. You take a specific part, let's say, in case of heinous crimes like rape and murder, a punishment specified under so and so has significantly impacted or has failed to curb offenses against children, offenses committed by children between 16 and 18. Got it? Are you with me? So there you have terms that you can capture. Take out, words that you can take out. Those words, that keywords that you can have standalone, defined, tested, are what we call as variables. Okay? Excuse me. So I'll repeat again. Now your research topic, after all the readings, you would have filtered out your research problem, identified research gap. That research gap and research problem can be summarized as key 10 to 15 key words. Are you with me till here? Those keywords and established correlation is what we define as variables when it comes to testing or research. Okay? Now, all of this might see as, terms. What we're going to do in next 5 minutes is we're going to try to develop variables and hypotheses. Then I can come to concept of variables in detail. Okay. So let me presume all of you have a research topic. Area identified. Yes. Now, I want you to identify 10 key, okay, let's do it small. 5 key variables and 1 hypothesis. 5, okay, let me not use the word variable. 5 parameters or 5 keywords. And I want you to give me a hypothesis. Can you please put it in your chat? You can write it down or we can put it in the chat. I see, Ramani ma'am, you've put POSH in offenses in workplace, right? Could you please work a bit more and tell me what in POSH is a problem? For example, I'll give you an example that I'm looking at as like, say, false allegations. There's an offense, there's a provision that punishes in case of false allegations, right? In such case, which intimidates female employees from coming forward, or which has worked contrary to the purpose of the purpose of the act. Just an example. So in that way, can you give me something more specific about POSH?
Ma'am, can I ask a question here?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Ma'am, we talk about POSH Act. It is. I know it is not a gender specific. It means both the genders.
Right. Right.
Now it becomes very difficult for male to prove. Unlike for female, it becomes very easy to prove because that is where I mentioned in the chat box POSH and workplace, because workplace, again, defining workplace is also a larger thing. Now there are workplaces which are open sky workplace. Now, unlike working from home also is a workplace. Now, do we define work from home environment in one geographical condition, place, GMT, EST and CST timings? It is very difficult to prove an offense which happened at one time point, and because when the time lapses, you really cannot disprove either ways. So, in that context, I have mentioned in the chat box about POSH and workplace. One, gender, next time, next geographical, third, yes, we can add on, ma'am. There is no limit.
Yeah, that's what happens. So, ma'am, as a person who's passionate about this topic, you would be tempted to take up all these issues. Now, all of these issues about gender neutral laws and its failure to address the purpose of the law is one challenge. Second, it's a standalone in terms of workplace defined in the context of work from home. It's a standalone topic in itself. Absolutely. So when you want to address all of them into one paper or one thesis, it becomes a challenge.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Correct. So now what we're going to do is we're going to break it down. Now you have identified 4 topics yourself. So we're going to take one of it. Let's say you want to write a paper on gender neutrality laws, gender neutrality under POSH, defeating the purpose of the statute. Let's say that is your presumption. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now you're going to break it down. When you say gender neutrality, then you go into saying, okay, what are the offenses that should it be, we're looking at, okay, what are the challenges faced in this regard? Now that's a very abstract concept, or let's say that's going to be somewhere difficult to define.
Absolutely.
So the first effort you have to put in is to see, now this would be a qualitative research.
Absolutely. True. Right? Very true.
So when you take up gender neutrality, then you're trying to say, okay, male, female, third gender. Now, females, what are the number of cases that's come forward? Males, what are the number of cases that's come forward? What was the reason for such disparities? What was the ratio of disposal of cases? How was it disposed? What does the act or statute talks about? And then what you have to look also into to see what is the crowd want from it. So if gender neutrality is going to be a problem, what is the alternative? So you're not just going to identify the problem there.
True,
No, if
true.
it is going to be if you want to transform it, how can we safeguard the interest? How do you make that clarification without hindering our workplace situation? So there, when we take out these parameters, you will have to identify terminologies that way that you can establish a correlation. Got it? So that is why we need to avoid a large topic. So every time we look at something, draw out specific parameters. Got it? And then
Ma'am, I have a question. Sorry to barge into your conversation.
No,
I'm
no.
extremely sorry. Ma'am, when we try to get into more specificity, the larger issue which we are trying to address gets sidetracked, ma'am. We get into more specificity, which will get into micro rather than getting into macro. If my issue is concerning about not in persona, but in REM. But now when I'm identifying into micro, then the purpose of addressing the in REM becomes persona. That is a challenge.
No, ma'am. Not really. That we will come back when we come to doing the test. So what happens in these cases is, say, for example, your problem, let's say your overarching problem, we're just taking ma'am's cases for everyone's interest. What is our overarching problem? Our overarching problem is gender neutrality, right? And its impact on the act. So when we do the study, right, the purpose of bringing a statistical or trying to bring in these values in is to say that we have tried to collect evidences. It could be 10, it could be 20. And what we try to do is when we establish a research methodology or a design, we're saying, see, we did not come out with a conclusion out of the blue. I can talk to 10 of my friends and come to a conclusion. At the same time, I can talk to 10 random people and come to a conclusion. So what we try to do is when we talk in REM, we use our backing to say, see, I might be biased, but that's okay. My research is not biased. We give them evidence-based backing. So, but you should remember, one, we won't address is posh and workplace. We don't address that in total. That I agree. We can't address that. Unfortunately, we'll have to do it in parts to get the actual picture.
But
ma'am,
when we try to address in parts, every part is biased again, and undoubtedly we want to address the larger one. But when we try to dismantle it into multiple small segments, what happens is each of it gives its own output. And when you try to consolidate all outputs, you don't get the derived output which you are looking at, which becomes quite biased.
Ma'am, I mean, by default, research happens to have that inherent disability, right? So unless, of course, this could potentially work when you have a sponsored project and you don't have time constraints in hand.
That's why I asked in my chat one of the questions: why do we really need research? If research is time bound, and when we are bound by that TAT turnaround time, you are having compulsions to submit it. You are forced because you have you are in the race. When you are in race, obviously you are biased.
Unfortunately, as I said, I think we can go on about this. The fact is, as time goes, whatever you've done would change invariably. So at that specific point of time, what you have understood is what your result is. The more you keep flexible, right, there's no conclusion or there is no output coming at all. So you're trying to throw out some output from whatever your stage of research is going to be. But let's see. I mean, it's some inherent challenges that we face, and that's what keeps research going also. So I'm just going to take some other questions now. Okay. Cost efficiency, governance continuity, voter behavior. Habiba. Lack of legal framework in India. Okay, I'm just going to. Okay. As parameters. Are you saying? Okay, I'm going to take Divya's example because lack of legal framework in India for refugees is raising concerns about national security. Divya, if I may use you as an example, can you help me here to identify identify the variables? I mean, can you break them down? Okay, tell me, how do you define legal framework? Divya? Divya?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
yeah, yeah. Divya, if you can help me here, okay? So we're going to take yours just as an example, all right?
Yes.
Now, lack of legal framework in India for refugees is raising concern about national security. May I ask you to break it down as keywords from this?
Ma'am, breaking down in which context?
In terms of what are the keywords that you're looking at here? What is it you're testing it against?
Ma'am, about the entry of the refugees in India, and they are staying in India, but there is no national framework for them. So it raises a lot of questions. It raises about the national security, about their infringement of their rights also. There are so many issues regarding this thing.
Yeah, that's what I wanted from you. There's so many issues here.
Yes.
Right. So when we have a lot of these issues, as a researcher, because I'm looking at a research paper of 40
Yes.
pages, or let's say a thesis that you want to be, evaluating. Say, for example, so I should be able to give out a specific test of situation. For example, is it about the entry that is a problem? Or is it about their, okay, I'm going to take this for a research paper. Okay. So when you talk about now, it starts off with lack of, okay, lack is one term. Legal framework. When I say legal framework, is it only national laws, international laws, or judicial principles? How are you defining the term legal framework?
Legal framework, yes.
Yeah. Second, third term I'm going to take is refugees. Are you talking about refugees defined under the UNHCR as political refugees, economic refugees, or even environment refugees? Then the next one is in terms of national security. Is it about national security in terms of terrorism? Is it terms of would resources come under the concept of national securities? Is your concern about catering to their interests? What is that the problem we are trying to address here? One more step ahead, because is it also about refugees within or refugees at the entrance or at the say, because we are bound by non-refoulement, for instance.
Non-refoulement principle, yes.
Right. So then the question of customer international law also would come in, because now India does not have a national law for its own reasons, because they want to settle it as ad hoc. And then when you define legal framework, then there's customary principle and all of that coming. So what happens there is, what we need to look out when we are looking out for a paper, let's say I'm going to look at paper at a large, is to say, we need to start filtering it. We need to start defining it. Could you mute? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I really like that people are taking the session from different places, So we need to start defining to rather stay with a generic idea. Now, this is important primarily because we are no more information collectors. Got it? We have to move beyond that. Are you with me? We have to ensure that research papers that you establish, and especially if you're looking at index journals, to just again general idea, they are more concerned about a specific study than a generic, unless it's jurisprudential historical. Got it? So in order to break it down, we need to make sure that our hypothesis is focused on certain areas, saying, I'm going to go a bit more to say the impact of customary international law on the political scenario of India. Right? In that case, then I come down to a conclusion is impacting India's ability to cater to the refugees at the border or within the country. So then I can be more specific, because as Divya rightly said, you're having so many challenges to cater to. You as a researcher, as I understand ma'am disagrees, but we have only so much of time in hand. There's only depth of solid output you can bring out. Got it? So in that case is where we identify the pre-parameters. And these parameters is what would define as the variable. And that is where a pre-reading becomes a problem. Becomes relevant. For example, legal framework, lack of legal framework, refugees in India. There are extensive literatures on it. There have been literatures that spoken about why India has only a national framework. From 1951 till now, we're coming to that parameters. Yes, we're coming to that parameters. That's where the suspense of variables comes in. There is a factor or paper that talks about ad hoc, that you settle it ad hoc. Now it's time for us to take that specific area and break it up. That is when we come to the idea of variables. So variables are the main topic or interest or broad keywords. Got it? The keywords. Please highlight on the keywords that is drawn from the research gap and research problem. And those variables are what we call as parameters. Got it? Are you with me? So the parameters that I'm defining here are the keywords drawn specifically from your research problem or research gap that was identified. So I'm going to take refugee, for instance, again, that I believe is something that all of us can connect to. Now when I saw the issue of customer international law. I saw issue of judiciary stepping in. I saw the issue of stopping them at the borders, because once they're in, we cannot send them back. The numeracy, India's ad hoc system. So it might be that I want to make an article on revisiting India's ad hoc practice on refugee protection. For example, the fact that India believes in...
Ma'am, I think refugees are different from illegal immigrants.
Yes, they are. They're definitely different.
Now we are saying refugee policy.
Right, we're looking at refugee policy. That's right.
But that question is regarding illegal immigrants.
Legal framework or refugees? I'm taking Divya's question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think these people who are coming is not refugees. I think we have a refugee policy. I think we call them illegal immigrants.
No, we're not talking. Say, for example, when does a person become...
Ma'am, there is a lot of difference between a refugee and illegal.
Yes, it does. But you know that we don't have a statute governing refugees per se. We work on ad hoc basis, based case-to-case basis. Yeah, but the point here again is about... the point again here is, in order to understand specifically, we're looking at, say, okay, let me take... now, when we're looking at Bangladeshi refugees or the Tibetan refugees, right? You have certain key factors concerning them. They have been, they have an established area here. Are they in a situation to go back or not? Who decides that? Got it? So some things that's drawn out specific to your area. And those keys are what we would define as variables or parameters. So it's very important that when you're writing a paper, especially for an index, or you're working on a thesis that you would want to put into test, and not something that you want to put it as a collection of materials and information, you are specific about the research gap that's identified and what you want to put to test. Are you with me on that? Yeah. So there you would see, as far as we are concerned, as lawyers are concerned, we're only concerned about the first three variables. Got it? The first three variables are basically, okay, so this is how it goes. Now, I will come down to the example. We have variables, type of hypothesis, depending on how you establish a correlation. We have a dependent variable, independent variable, and a controlled variable. The dependent variable is the output that comes, or what we call as the cause, or rather the effect of it. All right. Say, for example, I want to give you an example about. Now, when I raise a hypothesis to say, I'm going to take from my PhD, the engagement of stimulation exercises within classroom learning has a significant impact on the lawyering skills attained by the students. Okay? Okay? So because my problem was I wanted to understand, does it make any difference for people to emphasize on the importance of experiential learning? Where is the data or information to it? So in order to understand that, I have key identified, okay, what are these experiential stimulation exercises? I've defined those. What is that impact that I'm looking at? Lawyering skills, legal values or lawyering values. So have I defined those? So what I'm trying to establish between the hypothesis is this one act of mine has an impact on the other. And can there be an alteration in the situation? Now, why is this important in legal research? Why do you think it's important in legal research? These kind of correlations. Anyone? It's people related, yes. It's also because these variants evaluates the impact of a law in place, right? So as a researcher, yes, Adil. Adil? Yeah. So when they have so we are trying to evaluate an impact or an assessment here. Got it? So that is why you have that correlation established. And that is put to test. So the moment you identify the variables, because you cannot keep everything as a variant. The moment you keep everything as a variant, it goes for a haywire. It's like you keep a focal point that you alter something, you make alteration to certain parameters, keeping one position stagnant. You see a difference in the response. Okay? This is just one type of it, okay? There are a lot of permutation and combination depending on your research design. So the ideal, most commonly seen is that once you understood, you want to understand or test this, you try to keep certain element constant. And that is the independent variable. Okay? The moment you make an alteration, all right? The moment you make an alteration, if the impact varies, you know there is a change that is required, or there is no change that is required. Thereby, you will be able to prove or disprove if what you presumed is right or wrong. For example, gender neutrality, for instance. Now, I'm going to talk to people saying, okay, workplace, I'm keeping constant. I'm defining my workplace. Okay? Now, how am I going to make alteration is going to be based on, now that is where your data collection mechanism comes in. That alteration is what we're going to discuss in data collection. We're not going to discuss that in detail. That's where you get these tools. Okay? So where again we talk about is the outcome, where the factor that you believe have to have an impact on the dependent variable. So you make an alteration and you manipulate the study and there's something that comes out. So look at this as a lab experiment. Yeah, it's all right if you don't get it at a stretch. I'm sure most of you would also get it. But if it's a bit confusing now, it's good. Because we're going to take some examples and then we come back to it. All right. So what you take back is first, core research gap. Okay. Second, key parameters from the core research gap. Okay. Third, you define these key parameters as what we're going to understand as operational definition. Okay, we'll come to it. Then you need to understand this. An hypothesis, you can decide how you want it. But from a legal research point of view, a correlation hypothesis, relational hypothesis would make more sense. Okay, so where you're looking at a cause-effect relationship. Did you get so many takeaways at least? At least so much?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah. Now this is what we were talking about, right? How are you going to identify variables? I'm just going to re-emphasize before I go into it. First is about clear, defined key concepts, determining based on the intervention of outcome. What would be the, so independent is the cause, the output is the dependent variable. That is okay. And then you're like looking at variable type, is it categorical, continuous, how each of them are measured. Likewise, I'll give you this. Don't panic. We're going to take an example. Okay. Maybe when you take an example, we're going to understand this, right? How many of you are confused? How many of you like you were clear before the class? Now you're confused. Clear? Wow. Okay. Because very good. Yes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take an example, and this should hopefully clear a lot from your side. Lawyering skills develop. Yeah. Sorry, please.
Ma'am, for everything which you are explaining, it is excellent, except for that, can you give one example or simulation wherein, it becomes quite relatable? Suppose if you are taking your own thesis, you give for each of this topic which you are mentioning, if you mention what is it simulation or scenario, how does it apply? Practicality is somewhere, I personally am feeling that practicality part is missing, ma'am. Excuse me if
No.
Sorry.
This is what I wanted to know. So now, and I think this, maybe from here, this would be the one, because I'm going to take an example now. I'm going to implement each of those that I've discussed, right? Identifying variable, correlation, testing from here. Yeah. I'm going to take my thesis example, okay? So lawyering skills developed through internship, clinic, stimulation exercises are significantly different. Oh, I cut off the part of it. Okay. Has a significant difference in terms of its impact. Okay. Let's say this is my hypothesis. Now, what are my variables here? My variable here is lawyering skills, internship, clinics, simulations are my variables involved. Do you agree with me? Yes. So what happens? What am I trying to do? What is it I want to understand? Is there a difference in the lawyering skills gathered from different methodologies engaged in classrooms? Right? In order to understand that, what should I do? I need to keep the lawyering skills and see how, when I variate that with different different methodologies, is there a way it responds differently? Yes. Now, how am I going to test that? So the first thing I have to do in this case is, in my in the thesis that I will share with you, what I have done is to get a clarity is to define each of these terminologies. Got it? So I've defined what I mean by lawyering skills. So the lawyering skills is defined based on McCarthy's report, the Bar Council report, and all of that. I've defined what I mean by lawyering skills. It could be about argumentative skill. It could be about negotiation, however. Then I define what internship is. I define what clinical methodology is, what simulation methodology is. Then I also go to the extent to define, maybe as a disclaimer about theoretical. No, I'm not concerned about theoretical classes. That's a different hypothesis. So what I'm going to see here again is, how does lawyering skill engage through internship? What is it gained? How is it with clinics? Different. How is it simulation? Different. Got it? So I've identified my variable here. I've established a relationship. Got it? Now what I want to see, does it have an effect or an impact? How do I do that? Now that is where our data collection becomes important. Got it? So this could be the case when it comes to, this is a purely qualitative research. I could also quantify it, but it's going to be difficult for me to quantify because I applied a crazy methodology here, which I will discuss, but I'm going to take qualitative method here. So what did I do? I took my stakeholders. Students are my stakeholders. I took students. I had interviews with them. And I had to define who are my stakeholders. How did I design my sample? How did I define my sample, or what are the parameters or factors that I considered while taking up my stakeholders? And while considering those stakeholders, I posed them these questions that was developed based on my research questions, as well as the factors or the parameters I defined through my hypothesis. Are you with me? Somewhere? Because that data collection itself is, of course, you know the effect of it, right? I collect these data, I evaluate them, and there are these methodologies that I can engage with evaluating. That I notice the deviance. Are you with me? And that deviance is what is going to tell me if there is a significant difference or not. That is why you probably have heard some things like when quantitative, when you're taking up, you've heard something like t-test, ANOVA. Likewise, you would have heard these p-value, confidential intervals. That is where all of this comes into picture. Got it? So I'm just going to take you through this as step by step. Just an overview. All right. Did I define a research hypothesis? Yes. Then I define the key concept. That's what we call as operational definition. Okay. I didn't do this balloons. It came by itself. Huh? Third one is then I started defining them. What are my independent variable? What is my dependent variable? Then I categorized it. My impact on internships, impact on clinical client interviewing, legal drafting, oral advocacy, reasoning. What is the impact of legal clinic on either of these factors? So when I move these, is there a difference? So is it same with clinic on this, on the skills, as internships on the skills? And interestingly, our presumption was internships were the great contributors. No. Students found simulation as a greater contributor. Because I was surprised by the results. But you alter and figure out what is the best methodology that you can engage with. Then, of course, you have other controlled variables. you are keeping some things very constant. You only take up final year students, or you define. So these control variables defines the stakeholders you're going to take into consideration. Got it? Are you with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, perfect. So when you keep, because see, again, I want to re-emphasize. I don't know if you have heard, I've heard humorous time from scientists, regular scientists, pure science scientists. What do you lawyers research? Yeah? What is there to research? We at least have some molecules and chemicals to mix. What do you research? That's what we face, because we don't have but real humans to work with. So I have to keep, it might be geographical location, like ma'am had talked about gender neutrality workplace. I am going to keep a workplace constant. So I'm going to take only corporates. I'm not going to say take unorganized sector. I can't take maybe this specific sector, or I will only take unorganized sector. And the internal complaint and other complaint committees established by the state. So I would have to keep some things constant for me to really understand what the scenario is. And then I utilize different tools. Okay, what we're mentioning here, you're going to see this in, I know we're running out of time. Can I take some more time with your permission? I wanted to show you some of the testing mechanisms.
Time is yours. Yes.
Okay, because I want to come to some of the tests. Yeah, you can bring your chai and sit. Okay, please feel free to do that.
Ma'am, that is done, ma'am. You can please continue.
Okay, yeah. So then you identify how we're going to, factualize it. Got it? So all what we're trying to do through these parameter definitions. Okay, now tricky takeaway again. Operational definition, that your variables are defined. How do you as a researcher define it? For the purpose of your research. Okay? So that when I read your research, thesis or paper, I know this is what you're going to be testing in your paper. Okay? And then we're going to attach some value in some way or the other. This is in terms of quantitative, okay? Not in case of qualitative. Quantitative. Yeah? And then you try to bring a rubrics, which is okay. I mean, this again is based on quantifying it. Yeah? So you're trying to, as far as possible, reduce the disparity of definition and give a conceptual framework to your understanding. Got it? Are you with me? Now I'm going to continue with this example itself. Then you try to review based on your understanding. Whatever the response you get. What I'm going to do is I will take you through my testing just so that you get an idea. All right. Now, what we understood is we frame a hypothesis. We have identified core parameters based on our reading and research gap. Remember, research gap. We have the variables that we have defined that we think is a problem in a research gap. Okay. Once we have done that, we have established a correlation. Lawyering scale, this correlation. Now my problem is, I have such a lot of information I've gathered through mechanisms, right? I need to see if it's right or wrong. I have to put it to test. Testing is nothing but understanding where does our presumption stand. Okay? So that is what we talk as hypothesis testing means. Got it? So we're going to come to looking at what hypothesis testing is. So usually when you go purely statistical, you could have a null hypothesis and you have an alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis is purely statistical when you have a quantitative research, right? Where you try to tell a unrelated fact about a statement that has no variables per se or no correlation established. Whereas you have an alternative hypothesis, which we talk about establishing a relationship. And don't get confused. Don't worry about it. I would say, of course, go with the university university policy. If you have a purely empirical in terms of highly statistical element, you could have a statistician help you out. But what we need to understand here is about alternative hypothesis. Got it? Now, before I do this, can I just show you?
Up to
1
5
second.
o'clock.
I'm gonna take. I'm just going to show you testing. Okay, let me know if you can see the screen. This one here.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a document.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay. So I'm just trying to give you an example, okay, where I've done the hypothesis testing. Mean, standard deviation, don't panic. If you're familiar and you can do it, it's okay. But it's as far as a legal research is concerned, you need to know them so you can analyze the results that you gather. Got it? I'm going to hypothesis testing number 2. Wait. So if you've looked at all of these questions, I'll share this document also with you just so that you go through. You will see that when I'm going to come out with a testing or when I'm going to evaluate, I have framed my questions based on these predefined parameters and variables, right? And these answers that I get here, no, I use these answers to finally come down to the question of. So what I'm doing here is called as descriptive analysis. I am explaining what each of these results mean. And based on this, I'm going to go down to, see, for example, here. Based on the cumulative results that I've got from the response in my quantitative research, I would take the values to see if my hypothesis is proved or not proved, which is nothing but where in my visible naked eyes, there is a variance in the results. Got it? Where you see that there is some kind of, from the stakeholder response, there is a variance. And that is always based on what my previous questions has been answered by the stakeholders. Are you with me? Yeah. So when I'm going to be testing, it's about what is my hypothesis? How have I collected my data? What is the methodology that I want to collect? Can you see the screen about testing? Yeah. PPT?
Yes, ma'am. It was visible, but now I think
PPT is visible?
Now
PPT
it is not visible.
your desktop screen is visible.
Okay. Stop pressing. I'll have to share screen. Share the screen. Okay. Yeah. So now we established a hypothesis. Now, based on this, we do data collection. For collecting data, what do? It could be a doctrinal research. So remember, you can do the same thing in a doctrinal research. I'm going to touch upon that right now. So data, as you all know, are informations or quantifiable information collected by the scholar for the purpose of research. So it could be the questionnaires collected, interviews or qualitative data collected, or the doctrinal data collected from existing literatures. Okay? Once I collect the data, I have to adopt what is the methodology that I want to engage in studying this particular data I've collected. Say in doctrinal research, you have methodologies like discourse analysis, content analysis, case law analysis, likewise, that we engage with. Or even qualitative or doctrinal, we have something called as coding as a mechanism we engage with. Okay? So what is that methodology you want to adopt? Or in qualitative, you have thematic analysis, you would have, again, discourse or content analysis, depending upon the objective or purpose you want to identify or do your study on. So based on that, you will identify the methodology you want to put into the research. So in quantitative, do you want to go with t-test, ANOVA, chi-square, depending on what is that you want to gather or study from. So how do you identify that? Based on your hypothesis, research questions, and research objectives. Once you've identified the methodology that you want to engage, you collect this data and try to evaluate the data. Okay? So for that, you can use different mechanisms. So starting off with a plain Excel sheet, 2 SPSS, R, strata, all of these fancy terms they use, right? You can use them. So what are you trying to do here? All you're trying to do here is, all of you have read articles for your paper, right? I mean, for your thesis. You've all read articles. How did you decide what articles to read? How did you decide what articles to read? What to be done? How did you decide that this article, keywords, very good keywords. So ma'am, for example, if I'm going to take keywords of like refugees, and you're going to get about 100, 200, 300 papers? Naturally. Now out of 300 papers, if you manage to read 300 papers, perfect. I haven't. I mean, I would have probably over the 3 years, but does it make sense to read 300 papers? Now you had keywords, you would have studied. That would be a lot. And you as a human cannot, it's going to be chaotic. So you are going to see what is that, all of this you're going to find out. You have a filter mechanism that you adopt. There's an inbuilt filter mechanism as a human you have. But as a reader, you have written a paper, you have written your thesis, you have to convince a panel that you have. Now, it's about convincing the readers or people you're targeting it to. How are you going to say that? What if we have people with 2 different political ideologies? So there is when you say, if for a doctrinal research, your data are the articles you've collected. And for that, the parameters identified to specifically take up certain articles to rely on, which could mean that it might be the, let's say, jurisdiction. It might be the methodology adopted in the paper. It might be about the, let's say, the questions answered by the paper, that you have predefining factors, all the filter mechanism that you would be adopting while selecting a literature. This is similarly case when you go to stakeholders. Multiple factors. So how do you know which are the stakeholders you're going to go to? Who are the people you're going to take the response from? As I said, it could be from your known crowd. And people, your friends would always want to respond the way you want. So when you're going to communicate your results, how are you going to say, these are the results that you've spoken about? Or these were the factors you chose the respondents. So that is where how you design your sampling, designing the sample size, sampling methods, collection of collection of data mechanism, all of them gets defined. Got it? Then, of course, then you define all the threshold level, right? Then, you go into the statistical collection. So this could be in case of, so we're going to come into doctrinal as well, where you have statistic quantitative, where you have, the p-value, the probability value, confidence interval, quantitative. This is particularly for quantitative research. And let me tell you something. If yours is not extensive in terms of comparing two groups or otherwise, plain Excel, right? If you're only looking at awareness element, plain Excel can actually help you a lot. You don't necessarily need to have a grip on SPSS. Got it? So Excel can help you because Excel also makes a comparison of data. Unless you have, 3 category variable and multiple variance testing, you don't have to worry about them. Then what do? You interpret these results and you draw out conclusions. So I've just given an example here with terms of my thesis itself. No significant established. There is no difference in lawyering skills across experiential method. Then what is my alternative hypothesis? That there is a difference between 3 of them. So as I reach out to my questionnaire is also made is available. So I will also share that with you, just so that you get an idea. Okay. And then you test it. So how do you test it? Independent, dependent. You put it to, I use t-test in ANOVA. Now, if I'm going to discuss t-test in ANOVA, it's going to take its own good old time. Or if I'm going to go take qualitative testing, narrative or experiential, depending upon the type. And I had used in my research a triangulation which engaged with both quantitative as well as qualitative. And both of them were recorded accordingly. And then, of course, collection of data, all of this. I'm going to skip through. I will share this with you so that you can, try. And what you should probably try and do is, once you get the slides right, replace my topic with yours. Exact same place. Then you will find certain variants. Okay? Yeah. Now, just giving you an idea, as far as we are concerned, we should only be worried about t-test and ANOVA chi-square. Primarily. As lawyers, that's something that we engage primarily with. And you're familiar with t-test? ANOVA? Any of you not familiar with? And I think more than going into empirical, I would want to, since most common would be qualitative and doctrinal, I was thinking maybe we go more into that. So because of positive time, I'm going to rush a bit into qualitative and doctrinal because that's something that you most commonly would engage also with. Right? So yeah, this is the process that we go through. Data cleaning, what is the tool that you engage with and all of that. And descriptive statistics is nothing but where you're just like the first part of my thesis, right? Where I'm just describing what each of these terminologies mean or the data that I've collected simply means in its word. So I'm not making a conclusion or generalization from the data I've collected. Then I go into a inferential statistics where I put a level of test to it. That I do t-test or ANOVA to say, okay, from the data I've collected, is there a correlation that I can establish and draw out something? So actually you will see how t-test is done. And then, how it is done is where I make a predictions or generalization. And likewise, don't mind me skipping through the empirical because this can be a very focused area. For how many of you it's going above your head? I know I'm rushing through it. Do you mind if I go to qualitative so that, yeah. Doctrinal, as I'm going to presume that on a day-to-day basis, right? As researchers, this is what we engage with. Articles, not many of us, we do engage with empirical invariably, whoever is interested, but this is our go-to type. Doctrinal research, where we are relying upon existing literatures and data and our legal databases based on primary and secondary sources. So you know what primary sources are? First hand, where it has been validated by a legal authority, like our statutes, reports, likewise case laws, otherwise, and a secondary, including, and even in secondary data, we have the hierarchy of data from index journals, reports, peer-reviewed, or random information that you arrive at. How do you bring a statistical or a hypothesis testing in doctrinal research? How do you bring in an evidence-based study in this regard is what we're going to quickly go through. So of course, we define a legal proposition or a hypothesis. Got it? So instead of collecting an empirical data, we are going to be collecting statute case laws. For example, let me take an example about Keshwananda Bharati's decision. 50 years of Keshwananda Bharati. My scenario here is, I want to see how the basic structure doctrine has altered over 50 years. Now, this necessarily need not have a hypothesis, right? Because mine could be an exploratory research because I'm trying to develop a jurisprudential understanding. Keshwananda Bharati in 50 years, or 50 years of basic structure doctrine. How wide it has gone to what it is defined and how judiciary has altered it. So what I'm going to do here is to say, when I make that distinction, so let's say here I don't have an hypothesis. Fair deal? Yeah. So when I don't have a hypothesis, because I'm presuming it's an exploratory research, my data here is case laws connecting to basic structure. Now, from basic structure decision to now, let's say basic structure was referred to 50 judgments. Thousands of judgments. As a scholar, I cannot go through them. What do I do? How do I screen the kind of judgments I need to take? That becomes my parameter. So I'm going to say, I'm going to take basic judgments where additional terminology or basic structure doctrine was widened. Got it? And then I make filters. So only Supreme Court judgments, only judgment that has ratio decidency defining or widening the scope of basic structure doctrine, and maybe 2-3 other parameters. Once I've done that, I filtered my judgment. Say I've come down to 50. So when I come down to 50, as humanly I can read 50 judgments. Then I look at what were the rationale while advancing or widening the scope of basic structure document. Are you with me? Yeah. So when I widen that, a person who's reading my paper knows what I'm relying on when I'm making this analysis. Thereby, I am not randomly coming out and saying, see, basic structure has been widened over 50 years to include everything under Constitution. Rather, I have based my argument on a scientific justification, a systematic mechanism of coming down to that conclusion. And then I frame a legal argument saying, when I've identified the rationale from the cases, I have listed out factors saying that there's a pattern followed by judiciary before adding a part of the Constitution into the basic structure, that it was not random. it would have some backing. And I'm highlighting that backing and say, then that gives me the power to criticize a judgment saying it doesn't satisfy the parameter, you cannot include it as a basic structure. Are you with me? Then my article becomes authoritative. Got it? And then once that is done, I can prove about, now I don't have a hypothesis. Unfortunately, in this scenario, then I come down to a conclusion based on scientific backing. So this is how mechanism is good. So something that we generally use, usually universities provide for is atlas.ti in terms of condensing, coding of these elements. Similarly, you have different mechanism about engagement with qualitative as well as doctrinal. Qualitative is what where we're taking in interviews. So like say the words, terminology, context that we use. Or if you're taking a statute, like say if you have engaged with interpretation of statute, right? This is what I was talking about, case law analysis. One of the classic way of doing this kind of analysis is tabular form. That you have a mechanism of pre-identified parameters set out in case of cases, and you list these, and then what we call as is called as mapping. Okay. Now you have tools that can help you with this, because imagine you would go insane if you were to read 50 papers and try out these keywords. You'll absolutely go insane. So what we use here is called as atlas.ti that helps us flag them, like how you physically flag, right? It helps us physically or digitally flag these terminologies. And then, you know, there's another mechanism that you use in qualitative and doctrinal is coding. Okay. I'm not going into this because it's by itself a huge concept. I understand I don't know if it was, it had a lot of terminologies involved, but the idea that I wanted to give you out here is a hypothesis. You can bring in a scientific or evidence-based backing to your study, irrespective of the type of research you're engaging with. Got it? It could be parameters, definitely parameters, filters, and how are you developing. And each of these mechanisms needs attention, just like how you would get a subject expert on. Because unfortunately, we would give an intensive impact or attention to a subject because we are lawyers. But that is not sufficient. We need to make sure our factors are backed up by some kind of systematic approach. And we have a lot of it, and we have tools to it. So the idea of today's session was to give you an exposure to all of this, because each of this is subject on its own. And of course, I have mentioned and catered to all of this in my book, and you can get a hold of it. Excellent and amazing. But yes, it would need a bit of work from our side as researchers. And I will also share these parts of my thesis with you, just so that you have an idea, you know, how to engage with. And I would highly recommend, because over here at, I've shared it, at the university, we have data stewards who help us take care of all of these factors analysis, but we need to know them if you have to know how to put them in a paper, right? It should suit what we need. And since in order to understand that alone, we need to know these terminologies. You don't do it yourself, it's okay. But just so that you can analyze them, use this data to your advantage, it should probably help you. Yeah, now I think I can take another 5 minutes or 10 minutes for questions. I'm so sorry that it was just too much into one. But yeah, this is usually yeah. Yeah, feedback form. I'm going to stop sharing and then I will share the slides also with you. I'll share it with sir and then I will also share the feedback.
Participants can unmute their mics and put any questions if you want for further clarification.
I put the feedback form also. Yeah.
Ma'am, when we are doing this null hypothesis testing,
Yeah,
hello?
null hypothesis. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, I
This
can hear you,
testing on
Aaron.
null
Yeah, I
hypothesis,
can.
in legal research, I think whenever we do testing on null hypothesis, it shows it's positive. Comparing to our data, see now a statement like the even regarding these national security laws, we even though we have so many laws, but that terror incidents or terror regarding to terror cases are increasing. I think it's a null hypothesis based on differentiate between economics or social sciences, but it can shows when we do testing, it shows a positive, ma'am. Then how can we do test?
Okay. You know what happens with null hypothesis? We are saying what the variables don't have a correlation. Got it? It's more of neutral than positive. Got it? Now, when you test it, the idea of null hypothesis being rejected or not is with the p-value. So you know that we have a p-value that is 0.05, that probability, the variance of probability. So when the variance is more, like greater, we are saying the null hypothesis fails to reject, or saying that it's the hypothesis is proved or disproved. Got it? So I don't know if we can say it as a positive statement. Rather, we're trying to say the correlation part of it. Got it? Did you get it? So when you look at an alternative, you establish a correlation, right? So you're saying terrorism is increasing. You're not saying it's because of anything. Or terrorism is not decreased, or let's say POXO, or not POXO, I'm sorry. TADA, POTA, whatever we have now, we are not sharing a correlation in that case. We are stating a fact. Got it? So I wouldn't, maybe I would say it's a neutral terminology. And then we're just taking it as a mode to help us come to our alternative hypothesis. So mostly also if you're doing a qualitative, you wouldn't find null hypothesis because of these complexities. Because when it comes to us, as legal researchers, as Arun rightly pointed out, it's going to be difficult. Yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am?
Yes.
I have heard that sometimes, usually the null hypothesis will be like a negative kind of statement, right? Like there is no significance or there is no impact. This kind of things we used to say, right?
So I call it as neutral and no connection.
No connection.
Because, yeah, that's what null hypothesis. Because here
but
increase.
I have heard saying that some of the researchers, they tell it should be like there is a significant alternative, should be like a neutral, or there is no impact. This kind of statement should be said. Is that correct, or whatever the null hypothesis we discussed is correct?
As far as statistically and whatever I've read on books, otherwise, null hypothesis become neutral and alternative hypothesis becomes correlative. Statistically, if you look at it, the correlation gets established.
Rhea, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ma'am, correct me if I am wrong. The questions that are coming, I'd like to give one example. Suppose we all know that oranges are good for scurvy. So it is a correlation, that is alternative hypothesis. Now, if somebody proves this hypothesis, then the question will come, why not the other fruits? If the null hypothesis, we take that oranges are not good for scurvy, and if the alternative is proved, then the hypothesis testing becomes more reliable. Ma'am, am I correct?
Okay, no, I will have to get it a bit more clarified. When oranges
are good for scurvy, it is an affirmative hypothesis.
okay. I'm going to put this. Oranges are good for our skin. Okay, oranges has significant impact on our skin. Okay, that's an alternative hypothesis.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now oranges has, or if I'm going to put a hypothesis, it's going to be null hypothesis for oranges. I mean, it can be a plain statement of oranges is nothing. I cannot correlate oranges or oranges are healthy. Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, like a neutral, I mean, a very neutral statement that comes has nothing to do with the variance that you want to establish. Yeah. As far as I've understood. And yeah, that's mostly about, so it's trying to help us in terms of alternative hypothesis, because when you test hypothesis, let's say statistically, in quantitative, let me re-emphasize, in quantitative, we're going to rely on so many values like p-value, confidential intervals, mean, deviation, and all of that, right? So there it becomes that variance. And I'm still figuring out this part of it. So I would probably not. Yeah. Sorry.
Ma'am, can we also rephrase it as oranges are good sources of C vitamin?
Yeah.
C vitamin, because that is
But is it, will it be related to your alternative?
Looks quite confusing, ma'am.
Yeah, but because I think it's also because we've taken oranges, when oranges and legal, we might be. So remember this, maybe take up your topic and we'll see about how, how we can connect null and this with reference to, I will have to go back to my own topic to tell you this, because it's only 3-4 areas where I've applied null hypothesis. Oh, citation is very important. Someone asked me this. Citation for what, honey? I mean, I'm sorry. Citation for what? Citation by default is very important. But on overall, I think, okay, if forget, if not null hypothesis confusion, I'm sure statistically people are still having confusion on it. There's other things make sense. See, if you don't have a null hypothesis also, it's fine. Huh? As we have the liberty of not having it. We are not a statistical, I mean, we can still go ahead and prove and disprove it. It's fine. I mean, if you look at mine, I didn't have null. No, I don't have a null hypothesis. Yeah. All right. So I've given my mail ID just in case you want to stay connected. And I will share the details with Sir, who will share it with you. Yeah.
Ma'am, could you please share your, if it is okay with you, please share your LinkedIn ID so that professionally we can. I wish to connect with you.
I will share that right away. I will share it in the group.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. No problem. Precious mine. Wait 1 second. And I'll share it in the chat group. Anishka, my advice for you there is Sotero. Very, 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 very important. Please get hands on Sotero. Your life is cakewalk with Sotero or Mendeley, whichever tool you're using. And it's free. Sotero Mendeley is free. I think with Sir, we had done a session on hands-on session
Ma'am.
citations. Yes, yes.
Ma'am, I don't understand null hypothesis. What is null hypothesis? It is a negative hypothesis.
It's not a negative, just remember it as a neutral hypothesis. And I would recommend, are you in your stage of PhD?
No, ma'am, I am LLB student, 6th semester.
Okay, for now you can leave out null. Don't worry about null hypothesis. Leave it. Okay. Remember only hypothesis, alternative hypothesis. Remember only that. Correlational hypothesis. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Enough. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, then I'm going to take a leave. All right. I have to get somewhere else. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was so nice to see all of you. And we will stay connected. And I hope you go through it and start applying. Slowly, take it one step at a time, okay? Don't get overwhelmed. Doctrinal, you can totally do it. We've handled the harder parts. Yeah? Thank you.
So, ma'am, actually, we are very much privileged to have your session. And I was also astonished to see that participants are also actively participating. And this would be just an eye-opener that how deep the research as a topic can be. This is just a simple thing, that is hypothesis. There are so many things involved. So this will definitely become an eye-opener that how we academicians are to take up. And there are now this competition has become more steep, where Scopus index publication and all those things are there. And as far my experience is concerned, most of us, we escape this opportunity only because of the methodology part. So with all this reason, we intended to organize these sessions, and we'll also hope that in future, some more sessions, not only in one session, because in online, more than 2 hours or even more than 1 hour is very difficult to bear. We can understand, but it is also very difficult to arrange offline. So with all these negotiations and all, we'll try in future to organize some more valuable sessions with ma'am, and ma'am has been with me for last 1, 2 to 3 years. So with this, I request Aditya to carry on with the rest of the formalities.
Sir, what of am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Proceed with the vote. Thanks.
Sir. Thank you, ma'am, for such a valuable and noteworthy lecture. I request Arun Kumar to give a vote of thanks and conclude this session format.
Thank you, Aditya. Am I audible?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. As we conclude this insightful webinar on identifying the variables in hypothesis and testing, it is my privilege to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of Law, Central University of Karnataka. And first and foremost, I express my sincere gratitude to our chief patron, Professor Battu Satyanarayana, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Central University of Karnataka, for his continuous support and encouragement in promoting academic discussions. And a special thanks to our esteemed resource person, Dr. Rhea MammenPost, for sharing her expertise and providing deep insights into hypothesis testing. Your knowledge has greatly enriched our understanding for this critical research aspect, ma'am. And I also extend my gratitude to Dr. Basavaraj M. Kubagadi, School of Legal Jurisprudence Studies, for his guidance and support in fostering research and academic growth in the legal field. And I heartfelt thank you to Dr. Jayant Baurova, Assistant Professor, Central University of Karnataka, for his dedication and efforts in coordinating this webinar. His meticulous planning ensured that the session was both informative and engaging. And I am also grateful to the faculty members, research scholars, and the students who actively participated and contributed to the discussions. Your enthusiasm and thought-provoking questions made the sessions truly valuable. And once again, thank you all for being part of the academic initiative. We look forward to more such collaborative learning experience in the future, ma'am. Thank you and wishing you all a wonderful day and all the best for your research and for your academics. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you all sometime. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.